Right, so before we begin, I just want to know who is doing this currently commercially, who's growing hydroponic tomatoes. None. So you're here because you want to see if this is something that's for you and you're interested in that. Okay. And how many in the online session are doing it, Eli? Okay. So these are the topics that we're going to talk about. We're going to go over a quick introduction about why you want to do it and why not. We're going to talk about the different systems that you can use to grow hydroponic tomatoes. Quick overview of the economics based on what I've seen from people that are doing this. And then we're going to look at how you grow the hydroponic tomatoes and what does it look like in a timeline, right? We're going to talk about a little bit about nutrient solution. I'm not going to go into depth about that, but I'll give you the quick overview so you understand what systems you need to have in place to manage the nutrition. And then at the end, just harvest and post-harvest. You're going to notice that some of the management systems are very similar to growing tomatoes in high tunnel. It's just that you're not growing the tomatoes in the soil, but you're growing them in a growing media. So I always like to include this slide in these presentations because what we're doing with hydroponic tomatoes is controlling the environment. And as you're going to see later, one of the advantages is that we have higher yields. I always get the question from people, it's like, why do you have so much yield? Why is it, are you putting something in the water? And that's not the case. What we're trying to do is, when you look at a plant outside in the field, that plant during the day, at some times is gonna have to struggle with drought, with excess sunlight, or with insects and pests. But we're looking at the best condition, the best environmental condition outside, and we bring that inside, and we try to keep those conditions constant, right? So it's not that we're not putting anything weird or strange in the water. We're not doing black magic here. What we're doing is just keeping the plants in their comfort zone. So agriculture is about controlling the environment. We begin by growing out in the field. We have some control of the environmental conditions, and that's why we're able to produce a lot of food. There are several technologies. Then the next step in technologies that you can use to control the environment is high tunnel, right? You control the precipitation, you have some control of the temperature. Then the next step is doing hydroponics in a greenhouse, where you control how the roots take up water and nutrients from the nutrient solution. And then the high end is having a vertical farm, indoor farm, right? Where you control everything, every aspect of the environment that the plants need to thrive. So when we ask about, people have this perception about, can hydroponics be sustainable? So to answer this question, we first need to look at the definition of sustainability. I'm going to leave that there for you to read it. You have it in your material. But basically what you want to do when you talk about sustainable production is making sure that the enterprise or farm business is a viable business for you, for your family as a farmer, that you also respect the natural resources, and that you're making sure that the future generations will have access to those same resources that you're using to grow your crops. So there's 3 pillars to sustainability. It has to be a viable business for you as the farmer. You have to be good with the environment, with your resources. And last but not least, your farming business has to be good for the community. So with that said, let's talk about the advantages. One of the things that we can do, if you manage to heat up the greenhouse during the winter, you can grow crops virtually any time of the year. I'm giving the example of hydroponic lettuce here, but you have shorter crop cycles. That means that you're going to enter production earlier. And one of the first talks that we had today talked about plastic culture and being able to reduce the time from seed sowing to harvest, right? As an example here, you can expect a full crop of a full head of lettuce in a hydroponic system between 35 and 45 days. When you grow it out in the field, it will take you an average about 70 days to get that full head of lettuce. Food safety, Patrick just talked about that. What do you see in this picture? And that means what? There's a higher risk that that produce will get contaminated. Can you control wildlife? Can you tell wildlife, hey, do not enter this field? No. So notice that I'm not saying zero risk of contamination. there's lower risk. There's still risks that these products can be contaminated. And in 2021, we have one major food outbreak related to a hydroponic lettuce farm. Now, they found the pathogen in a pond outside the farm. They didn't find the pathogen inside, right? So there are still risks, but it is more manageable. Another advantage is that, for example, in St. Louis, there are some areas that you cannot grow crops in the soil because there's historical contamination with heavy metals. What can you do if someone in that neighborhood needs or wants fresh local food? So you can grow hydroponically in areas where you have limited availability of land. So I talked about the yields. I'm giving you some historical data of what the yields are and what is sitting at currently. Currently, you have the average about 450 tons per acre with hydroponic crops, hydroponic tomatoes. And what we've seen when we grow in the soil, on average, you get between 3 and 7 tons per acre of just growing tomatoes out in the field. I've seen some reports in high tunnels that they can go from 15 to 40 tons per acre of production. So we can safely say that on average, hydroponic cropping systems have 10 times higher yield than non-hydroponic crops. So the question is, well, and I said this earlier, we're not putting anything weird. We're not adding hormones to the water. It's not magic. It's just that we're controlling the environment. We're keeping those plants always in their comfort zone, so they're productive. Now, there are some disadvantages. Not everything is perfect. There's always some compromises. When you're trying to control the environment, you need electrical systems to control that temperature, humidity, and light. So obviously, you're going to end up using more light. You're going to have more equipment. Your capital investment is going to be higher. And I'm giving you more or less how much it costs to grow, how much infrastructure investment you need to grow crops in the field versus how much you'll need to grow crops inside a greenhouse. Now, these numbers were before the pandemic, so they are a bit much higher than 1.5 years. And it's a new system, right? It's not like you put a seed on the soil and then it goes in automatic mode. You still need to have some hands-on activities, and you need to know what is happening with the plants. I will say that in the last 15 years, whenever I talk to consumers about hydroponic crops, they were like, ew, I don't want that. That's not natural. But I've noticed that as the time passed by, their perceptions are changing, because now the things that they value the most are local food and supporting local communities. And the reason why I'm including this information in these slides right now here is because you can use this to develop your marketing plan. If you're going to grow hydroponic tomatoes, you may encounter customers that are against it, but you can use this information to inform them, hey, there's nothing weird here. And we're going to see later that people that say greenhouse tomatoes taste worse than field tomatoes, there's something there that may not be true with that statement. Okay, so let's talk about the different systems. Now that I gave you all the information about advantages and disadvantages, you're starting to think like, well, this is for me, or I just want to learn more about it and see if I can do this. Let's talk about the systems that you need to grow tomatoes. But before we do that, when people think about the word hydroponic, what do you think? What comes to your mind? Water, right? Plants growing in water. This is a technical definition, but the synthesis of that definition is growing crops without soil. So when people think about hydroponics, this is the first thing that comes to their mind: plants suspended in water. But what if I told you that in those pots, in those containers, there's no soil? It's something else. That's also hydroponics. Growing in a container where you don't have soil, that's hydroponics. Potting mixes, they do not have soil. They have bark, perlite, vermiculite, peat, or coconut fiber. There's no soil in it, so that's considered hydroponics. So with that said, we had the basic or the industry standard, the Dutch or the beta bucket, which is a system where you have the crops in pots with some growing media. You have an irrigation system, and you have a system to capture the draining water and recirculate that in the container. There are some variations that I've seen more employed for ornamental crops, not necessarily for tomato crops or vine crops, like ebb and flow system. And for hobbies, home hobbies, we had the wick and the fiber mat. Now the wick system, I've seen these people do that when they have their house plants and they want to go for vacations. What they do is that they put a wick, they take the plant off the pot and they put a wick around the soil pylon, and then they submerge one end of that wick in a tank of nutrient solution. So water is just going to flow through the wick into the root system. These are the main components. So the Dutch bucket system, like I said, is ideal for vining crops because eventually you're going to have a trellis system that's going to support that weight for the tomatoes and other vining crops. Now, the frequency by how much you're going to water or how often you're going to water the crops is going to depend on what you put inside that container. So this is one system using the beta bucket. The one that you see on the left is for research purposes, just a small trial. But the one that you see on the right picture there is how it looks in a commercial greenhouse. It's just a long line. And they sell kits of Dutch bucket systems depending on the size of the greenhouse that you have. Instead of using buckets, you can use grow bag media, grow bag systems, which saves money on labor because at the end of the growing season, you have to clean the containers and all the system, but this can save on labor if labor is a big hurdle for you as a farmer. Now, there's a lot of waste, right? One, you use it and then you throw it. Now, some customers might not be happy with that, but you have to make sure that this is a viable enterprise for you. There are options. You can buy these that are based on rock wool. This one, I think, is based on coconut fiber. There's many options out there for the grow bag medias.
Rock wool would be a lot of base.
Yes. 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 So there are options. These are the ones that I've seen used. I am from Honduras. And in Honduras, we use rice hulls mixed in with coconut fiber. But I'm not including rice hulls here because how easy is it for you to source rice hulls here in St. Louis, right? So these are the ones that you can find, but try to find any material that you can find locally that is affordable and you can actually get your hands in. Now, notice that some of them have a red circle around them. And this will come handy when we talk about the nutrient solution, what you're going to be feeding those plants. But basically, just as a heads up, the pH or the acidity or basicity of the nutrient solution when you have media that's inert is going to be the same in the root zone. And I'm going to talk about more in detail about what that means with the other media later. So you don't have to worry about that. Rock wool, it's they grab rock and they heat it up and then they extrude it. They put high pressure through a small nozzle and they have these rock fibers. Now, as of 2021, March of 2021, hydroponic growers can be certified organic, right? If you didn't know that. Now, if you use rock wool, you can lose your organic certification, even though it's just rock that you heat up. Now, the problem with rock wool is that the glue that they use to keep those fibers in place in that shape is not within the list of approved substances for the organic program. That's the reason why it's not considered organic. So I'm not going to go through explaining or reading these descriptions, but I'll leave this for you in the presentations so you can take an idea of what it takes to use these growing medias. Most of the growers that I've seen, they're going towards coconut coir or coconut fiber. because it's a waste product from the coconut fiber industry. Now you had to make sure that the people selling you this coconut fiber is selling you a good product, because part of the processing of the fiber is treating the fibers with a saline solution with salts. And you don't want to have high salts content in the growing media that you're going to use to grow your crops, right? So just keep in mind about that. And there are other medias, you can read through them. I'm not going to go into details about it because of time, but you can read about it. And if you have any questions, I included my email in this presentation. So let's talk about quick economics. So let's say you decided to put a greenhouse and start growing hydroponic tomatoes. They sell the kits, and this is based on a kit that you can buy. And you can see here it's based on a 30-foot by 96 production bay greenhouse. So if you buy the greenhouse, capital expense with the kit, more or less it's going to cost you between $18 and $30 per square foot for that structure. Now, what I've seen when talking to growers, that is just the parts. And when it gets to your place, you have to figure out how to set it up. If you ask the people you bought that structure from to put the system up, expect that to double. And people, and I've talked to growers, one in the St. Louis area that I asked him, if you will do anything different now with your greenhouse, what would it be? And he will say, I'll just find my contractor and put that structure myself, because the cost or the fee for them to come put the greenhouse structure up is very high. It doubles this, more or less, on average. I have it, and I took this from an Excel sheet, and I think it's $7 or $8 for the kit. $7 to $8 for the kit. And then the rest of it is the greenhouse structure. Yeah. Now, based on what I've talked to growers, field cost production for tomatoes is going to be between 40 and 60 cents per pound. In a greenhouse, it's going to cost you about 70 cents per pound to grow tomatoes. And this is average, like your mileage may vary, right? So some growers may see higher prices or higher costs, and some growers may see lower costs. But what it boils down, assuming the numbers that I showed you in the previous slides, let's say you're going to have a capital investment of $22 per square foot. If you do a simple 7-year depreciation, that means that every year is going to cost you $3.11. The yields of tomatoes vary from 15 to 40 pounds per square foot. Let's be conservative. Let's just be in the middle, 20 pounds per square foot. It's going to cost you 70 cents, like I showed in the previous slides, to grow the tomatoes. So your cost is going to be $14, right, for those 20 pounds. So the total cost is going to be the infrastructure cost per year, the capital investment, the depreciation, plus what it will cost you to grow those tomatoes. So it's about $17 per square foot per year. Now, assuming that you can sell this at $2 per pound, which is the national average wholesale price according to the USDA, you're looking at $40 per square foot that you're grossing from that production unit. So net revenue, 22.89 cents. This is just to give you an idea. Your mileage may vary, right? So make sure that you do your research and you contact your local extension agents if you have any questions. So what does it look to grow tomatoes? With a grower here that I talked to, he starts his crop cycle in August. He starts the seed transplants, and then he starts harvesting during the winter or the fall, winter, and spring season. He stops production right around now, like April, May, because it doesn't make sense for him to compete with tomatoes that come from a high tunnel, which is going to be cheaper, or tomatoes that are coming from Florida from the field. So that's when he stops. But basically, this is what a timeline looks like. More or less, it's gonna take 6 weeks for that seedlings to be ready, and you transplant into the hydroponic system. And notice that I'm saying stage 1 nutrient solution, stage 2 nutrient solution, and stage 3 nutrient solution. We're not growing in soil, right? So I'm gonna talk what that means. And basically what you're gonna do is just take care of the tomato the same way you take care in a soil tomato. You're gonna prune the lower leaves as needed. You're gonna train the crop. But then the only thing that's gonna change is you're gonna look at the pH and electrical conductivity of that nutrient solution and just swapping those nutrient solutions according to the plant's stage. There are many media that you can use to grow the seedlings. You can use the rock wool for propagation, peat pellets, and the synthetic materials, which is the Oasis cubes. But basically, this is what it looks like to produce seedlings. Now, this is based on leafy greens because I have in step number 5 that the seedlings will be ready when the first set of true leaves are fully developed. With tomatoes, we wait till the plants are at least 6 inches tall to transplant them into the hydroponic system. Since I asked you at the beginning, how many of you are doing this, are growing tomatoes? And I have this slide because I've been in rooms where many people are beginning farmers and they do not know the difference between a determinate and indeterminate tomatoes. So for those of you who do not know what that means, a determinate tomato is gonna act like an annual plant. So you plant it, it's gonna bear fruit, and then the plant's gonna die, right? It's gonna end up its cycle. An indeterminate tomato it doesn't have like an end point. The plant will just keep growing and will keep producing fruits. All right, that's the difference. When people go to the market, they see the word heirloom and they think, oh, this is good, but they do not know what it means. So it's any tomato variety that hasn't been tempered or bred further since before 1950. Usually you see in the farmer's market, they have high retail price, but you'll see low yields in the field because they're susceptible to everything. It's gonna be a little bit more challenging to grow them. There are different sizes. Most of the greenhouse tomatoes that I've seen, they go with the beefsteak tomatoes. One of the greenhouse growers here in St. Louis, they tried the cherry and the grape tomatoes, and they hated it because it's too much labor just to pick the individual tomatoes, right? So they decided, yes, they have a higher retail price, but it's not worth my time. That's what he said. Your mileage may vary. Maybe you can find cheap labor, or maybe you enjoy doing that type of harvest. But when you're growing tomatoes, make sure to check for disease, insect, and resistance to abiotic disorder. And there are some varieties that are proven to work in hydroponic systems. And when I say hydroponic systems in a greenhouse, it can get really hot during the summer, but you also can get scenarios where you have high humidity during the winter months. So you want diseases that are you want varieties that work in greenhouse crops. And down here I have a link from Cornell where they have like a huge table with the different varieties, and they list what they're good at, what are the resistant packages that those tomatoes have. So to take care of the plants, it's just standard IPM, integrated pest management practices. We want to take some time to put sticky traps to monitor for insect pests, measure the pH, NEC. I have here every 2 days. But for beginning farmers that are doing this for the first time, I recommend that you do the first weeks to do every 2 days, and then look at the numbers. And when you see that pH, when you see when the pH changes abruptly, then you set your monitoring frequency then. Some growers will be like, after 4 days, I noticed that my pH changed a lot. So his frequency is gonna be, or her frequency is gonna be 4 days. There are some growers, because of their water quality, they notice that every day the pH changes quickly. So the frequency of doing this is gonna be every day. Now, there are some systems that have online sensors in the irrigation system, so you don't have to worry about checking the pH. I will still, even though if you have online pH NEC meter, I'll still encourage you to check the pH of that solution because the meters can fail. So if you have a second meter, handheld meter, measuring that pH, you're gonna notice, oh, My pH with this mesh with my handheld device is telling me this, and my pH in my irrigation system is telling me that. So there's something wrong. I need to inspect. Just look for different things, but then you're gonna make sure to prune the leaves and adjust the plants on the trellis. And also, when you're growing indoors, even though tomatoes are categorized as self-pollinating, doing pollinating activities does increase the microbial yield and the quality of the fruit. And then this is part of that timeline. Remember, 3 nutrient solutions, but we're going to talk about that later. So there are no pollinators inside a greenhouse. Pollination is needed to increase yield and fruit quality. And there's many options for you to do this. Okay, so you can either do bumblebees, and I'm giving you how many bumblebees per square feet there. If you put more than that, the bumblebees will damage the flower, and you don't want that, right? You can tap the trellis, the wire, 2 to 3 times a day with a stick. And what I used to do is I will just walk down the aisles of tomato greenhouses with a stick, just tapping the wires. Trellis system, I'm just gonna skip this, but notice that the plants, what they do is that they bring the plant to working height, and then they lay the stem on the side. You can see that the stems are laid on the side in this picture. If you're growing tomatoes in soil or in a high tunnel, that's how you do it as well. Pruning, we want to make sure that we prevent diseases and that those plants are easy to manage. That's why we do pruning. And to do so, we remove any suckers and we remove any leaves that are no longer needed, which are the leaves under the first set of fruit that are ripening. Okay, you can read that later because I want to get to the nutrient solutions. Thinning, you notice this picture here. On the far right here, there's a picture of several tomatoes with different sizes that's not uniform. And on the bottom, we have 3 tomatoes, right? So what they did is that they thinned the tomatoes. Now they have all 3 tomatoes with uniform size, and that's what the market wants. So what you have to look at with tomatoes is the potassium and nitrogen ratio. If you have equal parts nitrogen and equal parts potassium, it's going to tell the plant you need to grow stems and leaves. As the plant starts to show the first cluster of flowers, you increase the ratio of potassium. And when you start to see the first set of fruits ripening, then you switch to the third nutrient solution, the third stage. So I will not have you go through the calculations. You have these. This is a recipe. If you're using the 5-12-26, 15-00, and Epsom salts fertilizers, I'm giving you a recipe. And in this table, I'm giving you, on the first column is the plant requirement, what the plant requires. And on the third column, it's going to show you what this recipe is adding to that nutrient solution. But you can use this recipe, and I have some instructions there on how to prepare the nutrient solution. Stage 2, I tell you when you need to switch to stage 2, the recipe, and instructions on how to prepare that nutrient solution. Same for stage 3. All right, how much do I have? 2 minutes? So when you make nutrient solutions, remember that I said 2 or 3 fertilizers, 2 or 3 bags. If you try to mix those fertilizers together at the same time in the container, those fertilizers are going to react and they're going to precipitate. They're not going to be in the water. So to do this, if you have a fertilizer injector, you have a separate tank for one of the fertilizer bags and a separate tank for the other fertilizer bag. If you don't have injectors and you have like a small tank that you want to prepare everything separately, you dilute those fertilizers in small volumes. And once they're diluted, once they're mixed in the water, you can combine those together. But do not try to put the fertilizers all at once in the same container. Simple diagram on how to set up an irrigation fertigation system. There's plenty of these out there, but I'm just giving you an example here. Or you can use a cart if you do not want to have several of those. All right. So, yeah.
Very much, Juan. You know, last week, we had a 2-day hydroponic workshop and Juan just taught you everything in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? Let's go to the back.
Hello, thank you for a great presentation. What again is EC?
Electrical conductivity or salinity of the nutrient solution.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Juan, could you comment on the use of tissue testing to help understand how well you're doing with
Yes.
nutrition?
So the purpose of tissue testing is to make adjustments to your nutrient solution. So what you do is that you send a lab, you collect the leaves of the tomatoes and then you send it to a lab for tissue testing. And it's going to tell you if your fertility program is helping the plant achieve the levels that they should be. Now, I gave you some recipes and that's based on nutrient solution. There might be something that may be affecting how the plants take up nutrients. Maybe the initial water quality is not up to par for what you need. And sometimes the tissue testing helps you further calibrate that nutrient solution to feed your needs. Yeah.
Are there any nutrient solutions that like a grower can make at home, or do you always have to be like just buying these solutions from corporations? Is there a sustainable solution or a solution that is, it just seems like with hydroponics, you're just always having to buy the chemicals from the man. Is there a way to avoid that?
So the problem with doing your own fertilizer is that if you do this recipe to make your own fertilizer, you have your source of materials that you're going to use to do that. How do you know what the concentration of your source materials are, right? It can vary. It's very variable. And someone tries to make your same nutrient solution, they may have a different results because they're sourcing the materials from somewhere else. And fertilizers with hydroponics is they're successful because the fertilizers are readily available. If you use organic fertilizers, you have to wait for microorganisms to break down those carbon compounds and release the minerals from the organic matter before the plants can get to them. That's what happens in the field. You have microorganisms in the soil breaking down the organic matter, right? In hydroponics, we're still trying to figure out how organic fertilizers, how to optimize their use in hydroponics. It's still not clear.
So I'm not sure if you said it, but the wastewater that comes out, what do you do with it? Or is it that the water is used?
There's a point that you can recirculate that nutrient solution.
Okay, how long? How frequent?
I mean, you're gonna end up using a lot of water. A plant of tomatoes in hydroponics can use one single plant 2 to 5 gallons of water per week. So you're gonna use a lot of that. But if you end up with wastewater, it's gonna be a really small volume. And right now, the recommendation is just dump it out. Or you use to irrigate some bedding plants in your home or something else. Yeah.
Any more questions for Juan? Thank you very
The
much.
taste, there's no difference. Blind study, many people have done blind studies and people cannot tell the difference between a greenhouse tomato and a field tomato. I just wanted to tell that to you. So if someone says, ew, greenhouse tomato.
Great. Thank you very much.